Were you surprised to see that now the DOJ and the Department of Transportation are looking into this FAA Boeing relationship and the approval, safety approval of this aircraft?
Well, I'm really skeptical of that. I'm sad to see that happen, and I hope that we minimize this criminality of what's tragic events.
Why are you skeptical of it?
Well, first of all, the Boeing engineers are probably the best in the world, and there are not a lot of people that can duplicate their expertise. So who is the Justice Department to second guess a technical analysis from a very highly skilled engineer? I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm only saying that who has that ability to correct those mistakes and foresee those outcomes? I don't think anyone in government does.
Just take us through the process of getting a plane like this approved for flight. So Boeing does the safety checks, and then the FAA sort of goes to Boeing to make sure it's safe? How does it work?
Boeing designates examiners and inspectors working for them. So there are special people within the Boeing company who report to the FAA and are their eyes and ears, and they have the expertise. The government doesn't have the expertise because these are newly designed and new ideas, and so they take the people and use them. They do that also in licensing pilots using designated examiners that are not government employees.
Gordon, we've spoken several times since the crash, I guess a week ago Sunday, and as foreign governments were grounding the plane, you were not appreciative of that. You thought it was speculative, especially in China's case. Did these comments out of the Ethiopian officials change your mind on the similarities between these two, Lion and Ethiopian?
Yeah, Carl, yes. Quite frankly, the jack screw from the horizontal stabilizer, they were both in the full down position. That's extraordinarily unusual. So that tells me there's a connection there. I do know that in the original Lion Air, that was the third flight of that aircraft before it had that accident. The other two crews were able to handle it. So I think there's some pilot training. I think there's some maintenance procedures. And certainly, Carl, there is a design issue, and they're going to address all of those.
Is that, I mean, when we talk about the jack screw, that's a physical component, right?
Yeah.
I'm just curious how much we can rely on a software fix. Can you describe to viewers what's the difference here between software and hardware?
Well, the software is driving the hardware's behavior, so the jack screw is just a methodology to move the horizontal stabilizer. That's what pilots normally do to trim the airplane in normal flight. Should that go haywire, and it does from other reasons than software, then there's a cutoff switch, and you can actually grab the wheel and hold it steady. So I think part of the issue is that the airplanes just took off. They didn't have much altitude. Certainly the second airplane had a very inexperienced co-pilot, no help to the pilot at all, who was just overwhelmed. So those procedures of a runaway stabilizer are practiced in normal training. The fact that they were caused by a different reason is not material.
Right. And I assume you're not skeptical of overall changes in design in this model, namely size of engine, placement of engine, no. Some sort of structural defect and whether the nose is pushed down or not.
No, I don't think so, Carl. I think they'll fix this one by having two sensors instead of one, and they'll both have to agree. I think that's a critical comparative that could preclude this from happening again. And two, I'm sure they'll put some ultra pilot interference mode so that if the pilot rejects it, it disconnects, which I understand it does not.
Back to the FAA, which is sort of what the regulators are looking into, that relationship and the development of this plane. I mean, I think one broad question is, has this industry been deregulated at all and sort of left to its own devices because of its tremendous success and impeccable safety record?
Well, if you look back to World War II, Boeing was building the bombers. I mean, the government doesn't build airplanes. Airplane companies build airplanes, and they're overseen by government regulators, but there's not enough technical expertise in the government to provide the necessary oversight. So they purchase or contract and designate experts in those companies to help them.
But I guess one question is, you know, there's fierce competition, as you know, between Boeing and Airbus. Do any corners get cut along this process in an effort to get planes to market?
You know, I worked for Boeing a long time, and they just would never do that. That would be really short-term thinking and catastrophic to their business, so absolutely not.
Finally, Gordon, the politics of all of this. Washington Post this morning has a piece about how the president essentially framed himself as the ultimate arbiter of whether or not to make this grounding, getting ahead of the FAA in the announcement. Does that bother you?
Yeah, yes, it does, Carl. And this is not a time for grandstanding. This is a national tragedy, certainly for the people involved. This is a very serious issue, and I know Boeing wants to get it right. There's a whole lot of the world counting on Boeing delivering them airplanes because thousands and thousands and thousands of people plan to fly, and they need that output. So, yes, it's not appropriate.